for coming and joining us for a little bit of reflection and conversation on Arboreal Theology. Might ask us to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Jon Pahl. So we had accomplished and wide Reiki scholars who currently serves as the Peter Fall and Elizabeth Hagen Professor of History of Christianity at United Lutheran Seminary in Philadelphia. We received his PhD from the University of Chicago. He is the author of some very several books, I think. Most recently, Etuma Bilan, A Life of Ismet, why was a scholar in Pennsylvania and Hatters of the World. Entire Sacrifice, The Religious Origins of American Values, and Shopping Malls and Other Sacred Spaces, A God in Place. That was my fun book. So we're here to hear about a neat project, and I will let Dr. Pahl introduce it to you. Please here. Thank you very much.
Can you hear me okay without the mic? Yes. I use my hands a lot, so if in the back you can't hear me at any point, simply do this and I'll grab the mic and go from there. It's my pleasure, true pleasure to meet with you this afternoon. Thank you to Samiha for the kind invitation to share with you my developing research on sacred trees in the history of religions. 2 years ago, I was invited to be the lecturer and preacher for a week at Lakeside, Chautauqua here in Ohio. My host invited me to offer a teaser for the week's lectures. My topic was sacred trees at a Sunday morning outdoor worship service. So we gathered on the shores of Lake Erie on a bandstand with huge oaks and maples and beeches providing a canopy through which the early morning light reached us as dappled and delightful. About 100 were seated on wooden benches in front of. I introduced myself and the topic of my upcoming lectures, and then asked in an improvisation, how many of you love trees? Almost everyone's hand went up. And then following Potawatomi botanist Robin Wall Kimmerer, who talks about how plants offer love back to people, I asked, and how many of you think trees love us back? One hand went up. I was surprised, so I asked, okay, what are you all sitting on right now? People looked down, saw some heads nodding. Then I asked, well, waving to the oaks and maples and beeches around us, and how many of you are enjoying the shade being provided by these majestic living creatures surrounding us this morning? More heads nodding. Finally, I asked, and how many of you enjoy breathing? A few chuckles as I concluded, that sounds like a lot of love to me. It's rare to discover a thread in the history of religions that provides near unanimity. But my early study of arboreal theology suggests that people have loved trees all over the world for millennia, and that the deepest teachings of our spiritual traditions hold that trees and plants love us back true. Trees provide us not only with products, structures, food, shade, and our very breath, but also beauty, strength, wisdom, endurance, cooperation, generational continuity, righteousness, empathy, and other gifts and virtues that evoke and illumine the highest and best of divine and human agency. In the 30 minutes or so I have with you over lunch, I will romp through my findings about trees in indigenous African, Native American, and Asian religions, and then turn to a somewhat more focused study of trees in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And because I've written up way more than I have time to share, I have 17 single-spaced pages here for you. I got a little carried away. What I'll do is speak mostly from the slides, occasionally referring to my text for particular sections. I'll welcome your questions, critiques, suggestions for future research. I'm a slow researcher. Most of my books generally take between 6 and 10 years to gestate. So it's fair to say that 2 years in, I feel like I'm still very much at the beginning. African indigenous religions, just for one example, the sacred baobab. Home of the ancestors, Africa's upside down tree. There are some great stories about how that happened. They grow to 100 feet tall, 165 feet wide. Some even have shrines inside of them. One has a cocktail bar inside it as well. They support entire ecosystems, live up to 3,000 years. The fruit has 10 times the vitamin C of orange trees, over 26,000 gallons of water in some of the large trees, and unfortunately, they are beset, and many are collapsing due to climate change. But across Africa, baobab trees represent a power beyond the ordinary, animated by the sacred spirit that infuses all of life. For Native Americans, like the members of the Menominee Nation, whose ancestral lands are near my home in Wisconsin, the tree den conveys the living Great Spirit. In the sweat lodge ceremony, when the logs are brought in from the fire into the lodge, they are welcomed as grandfathers, grandmothers. In forestry, the Menominee tribal enterprises have been recognized by the United Nations, by the Forestry Sustainability Council, by the Yale School of Forestry, for having cultivated one of the most sustainable forests in the world. John Pahl, the lumber operations manager for Menominee Tribal Enterprises, stated in an interview in the New York Times that the Menominee model flips the usual capitalist model on its head. Instead of seeking profit first, the forest comes first, the people come next. They want to make profits, and they do, but they flip the model, and the numbers support this approach. Over the course of 170 years, they have harvested already 1.5 times the number of trees that were originally present in hundreds of acres of trees that inhabit the forest. Roughly 1.5 billion trees. And yet they now have 40% more standing wood than they had 170 years ago. Because they follow the adage of Chief Oshkosh, harvest only the sick, the dead, and the dying, allowing the young to flourish and entire ecosystems to flourish along with them. This is a smart business model stemming from a spiritual commitment to seeing trees as kin. The other trees in Asian religions is huge, and the pun there was bad and intended, the field of trees anywhere. The Buddha was born under the sal tree, enlightened under a Bodhi tree, and descendants of that Bodhi tree are now planted all over the world. Bodhi Day for Buddhists is a festival held worldwide on December 8th. Feasting includes cookies in the shape of Bodhi leaves. You see some here, heart-shaped. The trees get decorated with lights and other symbols representing the importance of trees in the life of the Buddha and in the Sangha community. In Hinduism, I just returned from a trip to India, and you'll find sacred trees all over the place, including the lowly tulsi, or basil tree. Tulsi is a personification of Lakshmi, the goddess who gives wealth and prosperity. She's an incarnation, the consort of Vishnu, so every Vaishnava temple almost will have a Tulsi tree. And you can see a Tulsi tree right behind Tulsi there, just to her right, your left as you're facing it. It's a basil tree. Worship with Tulsi involves darshan, of course, seeing God and being seen by God, manifest, represented through the tree. But then also they'll take wood from the stems and make prayer beads. And for the leaves, they make tea and essential oils that then gets diffused. So the smell of Tulsi circulates in the room. I wanted to bring along, I forgot, unfortunately, a diffuser so that we could have enjoyed the smell of basil with our lunch. One last example from Asia, Shinrin-yoku, or the practice of forest bathing, is both a spiritual practice and a science in Japan. It's developed in the 1990s, but with ancient roots in Japanese indigenous religions. It's a form of ecotherapy, a respite from screen time and from other forms of labor. And this little book by Dr. Jing Li, who is the chairman of the Japanese Society for Forest Bathing. And they have trails all over the island nation that are cultivated and cared for with government support. Puts it like this: we are part of the natural world. Our rhythms are the rhythm of nature. As we walk slowly through the trees, we bring our rhythms into step with nature. All right, the three monotheisms then, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. We find nuances differentiating their teachings and practices in relationship to trees, but all three have in fact quite substantive potential arboreal theologies. In fact, attending to the presence of trees in the family of Abraham opens us to a theology of abundance rather than the exclusivist scarcity which the traditions sometimes foster, as Regina Schwartz has noted in The Curse of Cain, the violent legacy of monotheism. A theology of flourishing, following Miroslav Volf, and an ethic of human reverence for and stewardship of trees can be found in all three traditions. We'll treat each in turn. So, trees in Tanakh, right from the beginning, day 3. Genesis 18, the first promise of the covenant, happens under an oak tree. A descendant of that oak tree is now in heaven to this day. Joshua 24, Joshua renews the covenant in a forest shrine under an oak where he places a pillar. And that forest shrine, the prophets didn't care for much, some of them. And Asherah, you see here over on the right, a forest deity for Canaanites, some believe also was the Hebrew goddess, and mentioned 30 times in the Hebrew Bible, usually just translated in English as forest or grove, not with her proper name. Next. Now, there's a wonderful book by Mari Jorstad with a really bad title, and I spoke with her about it. She agreed, because it's really trees in the Hebrew Bible. Says, trees hear and obey commands, protest human misconduct, lament and offer praise, and affect human history. 1 Corinthians 16:33, trees sing and shout. Have you ever heard trees sing? Yeah. Judges 9:7-15, trees argue against a king. They say, I don't want to be king. I don't want to be a king. I don't want to be a king. And so the brambles wind up saying, okay, well, nobody else will do it. I'll do it. This particular concept might be appropriate for some rallies that are happening across the U.S. in our current political climate these days. Isaiah 55, trees clap their hands. And in Zechariah 12, trees wail. Now, this is myth, metaphor, but it's also scientifically documented according to Peter Wohlleben, The Hidden Life of Trees, who says trees feel, in fact, respond to stress. And otherwise, Jorstad puts it like this: trees, just like humans, can have their land taken away, can suffer, and can die. There's a really lush arboreal theology of the Song of Songs. A rose of Sharon meets an apple tree. Yep. Your channel is an orchard of pomegranates. Come to my garden and eat its choicest fruits. Jorstad again. In the song, bliss is the reward for those whose bodies bleed across distinctions, those who give themselves to be plant and animal and architecture. And in these moments of blurring and blending, offer themselves to another in love and trust. Metaphor and nature walks blend into each other. The lovers are in the garden. The lovers are gardens. The lovers eat from the garden. trees in the Talmud. Then, very quickly, trees are a metaphor, symbol, and example of human moral choices, according to author Stephen H. Farnoff. Wisdom is a tree of life in Proverbs. And the rabbis take this in the Kabbalah and develop it into an entire system around the tree of life. Generational continuity and care. There's a wonderful story in the Babylonian Talmud about a sage who's planting a carob tree. Somebody comes up to him while he's planting this carob tree and says, "How long does it take before that tree bears fruit?" The sage goes, 70 years. The guy goes, "Do you think you're going to live long enough to enjoy that fruit?" And the sage replies, "I found a fruitful world because my ancestors planted trees for me. Likewise, I am planting for my children." Trees converse. There's a wonderful word play in the Talmud between a word for shrub and the word for converse. And there's a great view book by Belden Lane, The Great Conversation, where he writes, "We are surrounded by a world that talks, but we don't listen. We are part of a community engaged in a great conversation, but we deny our role in it." And then finally, rabbis describe Torah as a tree of infinite knowledge, or even as an orchard. And you see the Torah scroll there, the tree of life, the name of a synagogue, as we learned tragically in Pittsburgh. Okay, those are just a couple touchdowns with what is in fact a rich rabbinical arboreal theology. And then to Bishvat. I have never been able to participate yet in this festival, but I look forward to someday. Historically, Judaism has 4 New Years, and Tu Bishvat is one of those 4. Originating in the medieval period, but experiencing a revival in recent decades across all streams of the tradition, albeit with diverse interpretations and practices. Tu Bishvat is celebrated at the time of year that trees begin to bud in Israel. On that day, it was Arboreal 2 in 2026. Jews are encouraged to eat fruit, especially those common in the Bible, such as olive, figs, carob, grapes, and pomegranates. Not really an individual holiday, however, many Jewish families and congregations will gather to celebrate the day, often in a special tree and major key seder. Sometimes a Friday or Sunday Shabbat service that most closely corresponds to the actual date of Tu B'Shvat will be dedicated to stories about trees through Torah, their plank, corresponding songs and prayers, and a message related to the topic, often encouraging people to grow like trees do. Finally, some congregations have taken to celebrating the day or a day near it in a fashion similar to a Jewish Arbor Day, including the planting of trees as a way to honor departed ancestors, to contribute to another generation and to care for the planet. All in all, however, across Scripture, historical tradition, and contemporary practice, it's fair to say that trees play an important role in the spirituality theology of Judaism. Same can be said, or could be said, throughout most of its history, at least, about Christianity. Christians inherit, of course, all of the trees in the Hebrew Bible, and once you begin to pay attention to the theme, the teachings of the New Testament appear decidedly green, all the way down to the final chapters of Revelation, where a tree is at the center of the New Jerusalem come down from heaven, with the leaves of the tree for the healings of the nation. A fine little book, evangelical lay theologian Matthew Sleeth, Reforesting Faith, tries to persuade his fellow evangelicals to pay attention to scriptures and the plants, trees. As he points out, other than God and people, the Bible mentioned trees more than any other living thing. In the pre-modern 1611 King James version of the Bible, Sleeth counts 967 times that the words tree, leaf, branch, root, fruit, and seed occur. More modern translations, unfortunately, have minimized these references, denuding Scripture of its arboreal theology, a pattern that coincides with the way industrial technologies like clear-cutting have denuded the planet of many of its forests and trees. But you can see some of the evidence. There's much more. The kingdom of God is like a tree, Jesus teaches in all of the Synoptic Gospels and the Gospel of Thomas. This is the mustard seed, that tiniest mustard seed that grows into this large bush in which birds live. Right? The story has an edge to it, though. It's a contrast between the power of God that works like that with the force of empire. And there's humor in it as well, because the mustard seed isn't a tree, really. It's an invasive weed. So the power of God is like the power of an invasive weed, in fact. So the power of God is found among the least and lowest, not the mighty on their thrones. Consider the lilies, and why worry? Or consider a Midwestern forest in fall, surrounded by such splendor. Why do we worry? John 15, high Christology in John, Jesus is the incarnate on the Logos of God, says, I am the true vine, you are the branches. Abide in me as I abide in you, and you will bear much fruit. The metaphor is pretty explicit. And it became a favorite in Christian art and architecture. So this is one of the places I've studied a little bit and hope to study more closely. This is the 12th century Basilica of San Clemente, Rome, where the cross becomes the tree of life with branches of the true vine connecting the communion of the saints across the centuries. So this is the apse on the left, and then the detail on the right, Jesus on the cross, the doves of the Spirit connecting to the vine, which then encircles the entire community. Paul picks up the same theme, of course, talking about the cross as the center of this theology, and how Jesus overturns the curse. Anyone who dies at a tree is cursed, but the tree then becomes an olive tree into which are grafted, right, people of faith. It's a direct metaphor. And it appears in early Christian iconography, so as Rita Nakashima-Brock and Rebecca Ann Parker have argued. The earliest images of Jesus in the catacombs of Rome are not crucifixes. They're Jesus as the Good Shepherd, surrounded by trees and plants, pomegranates, olives. In the caves and crypts below, there are over 500 of these images of Jesus as the Good Shepherd. It's far and away the most common representation. Of course, it points to paradise on one level, but it also celebrates the beauty of the natural world, and in particular, greening things. As Christianity became listed and moved north, the missionaries discovered, sometimes to their chagrin, true deities among the Gallic, Scandinavian, and Germanic peoples. And yet, that became transmuted and incorporated, transformed in lots of ways by Christians in their own forms of Arboreal theology. One example, there's a couple of examples. The Dream of the Root is a story, it's the story of the cross, told by the cross. It's a poem, and it's really quite beautiful and even moving. Today, that tree laments the way it was used, but then also celebrates the resurrection. The Book of Kells, another example, you see a border up on the top, and then an image of the Virgin and a child surrounded by all this greenery as well. So taking both Celtic and Christian, synthesized. But it's really Hildegard of Bingen who articulates most vividly the animating spirit of medieval Christian arboreal theology. For Hildegard, Jesus' power was the power of God found in all plants and trees, which she called in her neologism, viriditas, usually translated to mean green power. Hildegard describes viriditas as, quote, the lush green of life in all the beauteous creations, as well as the healing powers and the organs of health and vitality of the spirit. Even more, viriditas extended beyond the divine. There's a power of eternity, Hildegard writes, and it is green. Hildegard thought human reason, knowledge, and hatchets to all reap that they share in his power in eternity. Even more specifically, she claimed that the grace of Christ brought lush greenness to shriveled and wilted people and institutions. In the beginning of Hildegard, all creatures were green and vile. They flourished amidst flowers. Later, the green figure itself came down. In short, Jesus was green, naturally, veritas incarnate, God's breeding power in the flesh. And I believe this arboreal theology became translated into Gothic cathedrals, forests in stone. I was fortunate to take pilgrimage to 8 Gothic cathedrals in France with my son, daughter-in-law, and my wife, Lisa. And my experience in these places, you see images from them. On the left is Chartres. On the top, Saint-Denis, often taken to be the mother of Gothic architecture. And down below, the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona. My experience in these places, here the light is understood as the essence of the Gothic, but the light in these places is dapple. It's coming through these stained glass windows. It's like being in a forest. The light is muted. It moves, even. The other feature of Gothic architecture is height, because of the invention of the flying bushes. Same experience as being in a forest. I walked through these places. I felt small. I felt fragile. I felt finite, in comparison to the grandeur of these forests in stone and the glory of God. That experience is intended, I believe, in association with the place. So the pagan forest groves became Gothic cathedrals. Chartres, in fact, is built on the site of a Roman forest grove. Now, in contemporary Christianity, I've struggled to find anything comparable to Bishvat, alas. And the last really rich arboreal theology in Christian theology until very recently was Milton. And I would love to be able to read to you his descriptions of almost every page of Paradise Lost. There are trees and flowers and green things. It's incredible, lush, right? But what I want to highlight for today is what happens when Satan appears. Satan perches on the tree of life, the highest, in the middle of the garden, surveying the scene, and Milton brings home the contrast between this lush life. It's a great song, by the way. And the Satan's approach. Yet not true life thereby regained, but Satan does, devising death to them who lived, not of the virtue thought of that life-giving plant, but only used for prospect. What well used had been the pledge of immortality. End quote. Satan, trapped in despair, uses nature only for prospect, not for its life-giving virtue and beauty, not for its spirit. Milton, in short, anticipated the modern loss of paradise and its trees through rapacious greed, arrogant anthropocentric theologies, and a thoroughly transactional relationship to the world. That attitude toward trees is not like that of the current administration of the United States. President Trump, in an executive order dated March 10, 2025, mandated the immediate expansion of American timber production. As the order clarifies, quote, "Our inability to fully exploit our domestic timber supply has impeded the creation of jobs and prosperity, threatened our economic security," end quote. That willingness, that eagerness to exploit trees is the transactional mindset that destroys entire forests and threatens to destroy the planet. So we live, as Max Weber put it, in a disenchanted world, and with nature shorn of spirit and reduced to brute matter. Fortunately, there are people working on this. Recently in Christian theology, starting with Tyler Descharbin, Joseph Sidler, one of my Lutheran theologian predecessors, Rosemary Radford Ruther, Guy and God, my dear friend, colleague, collaborator of this project, Mark Wallace, his last book, When God is a Bird. And Padre Carvalli, fine teaching at Union Seminary now, who's writing liturgies, earth-centered, eco-centered liturgies. They're getting in big trouble for praying at trees and things like that. So there's, in short, at least an implicit, strong arboreal theology in Christianity that has by and large been lost. Arboreal and theology in Islam, then green deen, green religion, green way of life. I've written a biography of Fethullah Gulen, and see there his most accessible work in English, and this is where the quote's from. Nature's not just brute matter, but has a certain sacredness, he writes, as one of God's two books, the book of nature and the book of Revelation, between which there can be no conflict. We must fly with two wings, is the metaphor that he uses, borrowing from the mid-20th century Kurdish reformer Said Nursi, holding together both the truth of science, the book of nature, and the truth of Revelation in the Quran. I experienced this vividly on a recent trip to New Delhi. We went to the Qutub Minar complex, which dates back to the Delhi Sultanate in the 12th to the 15th centuries. And you see manifest in the minaret God's two books together. So there's the whole thing, and then this is a close-up. You see the Quran. But wound around the Quran are vines, and then there's a whole other band with just vines and flowers, tulips, roses, and so forth. So the two books of God held together in this beautiful piece of architecture. We are also fortunate that we see the obligatory selfie of me at the Taj Mahal. And again, the same message conveyed. In the arches, all the arches, you have the Quran and you have the book of nature. I was blown away by the place. Often, you visit a place you've always wanted to go to and it disappoints. This did not. Now you see some of the detail. Two trees in Quranic tradition, the Sunnah. Of course, Muslims share many of the trees with Jews and Christians. Trees in Eden, Abraham's oak, the burning bush for Moses, the tree that provided shade to the Nineveh to Prophet Yunus. And here you see a miniature depiction of Yunus underneath this tree that in both Hebrew scripture and in the Quran is a gourd. And in the Sunnah in particular, the argument is the gourd was a pumpkin because it provides easy food and has big leaves that provide shade for Yunus. And it also happened to be one of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, favorite fruits. So, again, these common threads and themes that once you have eyes to see, you begin recognizing their importance in the story. There are distinct trees in Islam as well. The tuba tree of heaven in particular is fascinating. It is a tree in paradise that the hadith says it would take a rider 100 years to move out from underneath its shade. I mean, that's a big tree. Now, of course, shade is a valuable thing in the Middle East, and it's also a valuable thing for cities today. Trees or cities that are green, temperatures are reduced by multiple degrees. And here you have the image is from the Dallas Museum of Art, the tuba tree. They're often upside down, in fact, with the roots on the top, and then the 99 beautiful names of God inscribed on the leaves. I mean, the book of nature and the book of the Quran held together. One hadith even describes views to a tree And this is actually a YouTube video that I watched about this particular tree. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, preached next to a tree, the story relates. But some people asked him, don't you want an minbar, a pulpit? And Muhammad says, yeah, okay, sure. So they build the pulpit. And on the Friday, he ascends the pulpit, and the tree begins sobbing, crying at this loss of the presence of the prophet. So the story goes, the prophet climbs down off the minbar and goes and hugs the tree until it calms down. Again, a rich potential arboreal theology in Islam as well. One final stream of the tradition emphasizes planting trees. Again, there's a report about the prophet, peace be upon him. If a Muslim plants a tree or sows seeds, and then a bird or a person or an animal eats from it, the planting is a charitable gift, sadaqah, for the planter. In fact, this gift continues even after the death of the planter, reinforcing the lessons in the trees from the Hebrew about generational continuity. Another hadith puts it quite plainly, if the hour of the day of resurrection is about to happen and one of you is holding a palm seed, let them take advantage of even 1 second before the hour to plant it. And fortunately, there are environmental theologians and activists at work across the Islamic Ummah. Building on the work of Sayyid Hossein Nasr, a pioneer in Muslim environmental ethics, there are individual scholars and groups dedicated to green deen, as the Muslim journalist and theologian Ibrahim Abdul Mateen puts it. Groups like, and you see many of them here, the Global Muslim Climate Network, the UN Nations for Faith, Nations Faith for Earth Initiative, and many more. Green Faith, Interfaith Rainforest Initiative, and all of them. Involved in initiatives in reforestation and efforts to protect trees and forests. I'll close then where I began this section, close to that time, with words from Fertility Len. And a beautiful, an Ebru painting, so done on water. I actually bought a print that we will hang in our dining room with some other Ebru that we have, tulips in particular. Here's what he writes. People of faith see all existence, living or not, as a family. They make contact with the rest of creation, take an active part in the life of things, and in their conscience, they feel the vastness of the tile of Bicedron which has been bequeathed to us. They inhale the scent of the earth as if it were the sweetest of aromas. They salute the orchards and gardens, the mountains and valleys, the grasses of trees, the roses and flowers, with the language of their heart, as if these things too had senses. They caress all creatures that they encounter as if they were friends, assigned to keep them company in this guest house. With every action, they demonstrate that they've been sent to earth as a sign for agreement and reconciliation. End quote. May it be so. For the fate of our imperiled planet may depend on whether we relearn truly to love the trees that have given us, over the millennia, so much love of their own. Thank you. I look forward to your questions. Those are the woods next to our house where I walk and pray every morning with our dog Otis. My parents both passed away recently, and it was a trauma. It was a real grief. And we're fortunate to have 38 oak trees in this woods, and I had now named them for my ancestors going back 3 generations. It has been a true balm for me. Questions, remarks, critiques? And again, my email is up there. If there's something that is percolating that, please.
Oh, hi there. I'm Jean Ferrick. I'm actually a Shakespearean, and that I'll be teaching a class on with Seki Saratophrag, Sacred Nature and World Literature and Whoever Lived It. So this is just like delivering it up to us on a silk black.
I'll be happy to send you the essay out of the slide.
The board is just that is about this bill that Carroll based on myself.
My question is this little small thing. You mentioned the Cassie that in Muslim conditions, that someone was, as you portrayed, at least in one case, the tree is upside down. And I was wondering if you could sort of just reflect a little bit on why that is.
I don't know. Maybe Zeki could help me, but with this, I really don't. Again, I'm just beginning this research. I don't know. Sam, any Muslim scholars have theories on this or knowledge?
With this, like in the unseen world, because we don't see it, it's not touching the physical world. And the measurement of the unseen world are different. So, like one writer is surrounded 100 years, still be tired to finish under the shade of the two. And that's what it is.
Everything's upside down.
It unlike what the trees in the world, it is the roots are up and the branches are up.
Yeah, it's a good question. No, I'll follow up and see more what I can discover about it. But it's a common theme in the representations of Jewry from the images I've discovered, and that's not me. But there are a lot of it. In fact, I saw another. No.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed throughout the presentation that among the way that you've organized these is sort of by tradition, and I see certain advantages to that. Certainly, ways in which people from different traditions can see sameness enables people to work together in all kinds of wonderful ways. But there's also something a little bit obscured there. For example, the way the rabbis of the Mishnah first think about Tu Bishvat might profitably be compared with Paul, who was working in the sort of same time in the same place, and ideas of trees there, whereas later European Kabbalistic notions of trees and the Gothic cathedrals might be compared in certain interesting kinds of ways. And so I guess I would say there's a cost as well to sort of flattening and synchronically all of these to Jewish, Christian, Muslim, when in fact the lived reality of all these peoples that everybody's mixing and everybody's changing. There's no such thing as Judaism or Christianity or Islam.
I was thinking that very thing this morning of saying there are these interesting parallels, in Chronos, have these that I can kind of take and explode. So thank you for that. It would make for a more integrated and less choppy presentation, I'm sure. It's a great.
Also in Jonah, kikayon, the word is a apax legomena. It appears nowhere else in the Hebrew Bible. So whatever it is, not only don't we know what it is, but we can't know what it is, even that it's a plant at all, maybe in Pleski.
It's just translated as Lord,
Right. But you got me. Jacob's ladder, sulam, is also a hapax and almost certainly doesn't mean ladder in context, so.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you very much for that.
Just an idea, because talking about a couple of days, my husband that contact just built an afterworld in Samarkand view, and they are talking about it, that here in this law, the
power in form of the bishop of Omar here. But I don't come your question. That is me, for example, the apple and Kiwanjikak in apple conducti.
Look at I did a couple of months as named Mazir took up the act, right?
and stop the active and to be another year for the other. And this is the thing that in this God, the power of the God is clearer than his victor. But when you think about the hereafter, then the total opposite. Whenever you think of another pity, where it's something, it will go immediately that.
That's great. I mean, that's the theology of abundance that I'm talking about, that trees can point us toward, rather than the scarcity that is so often associated with monotheistic tradition. And it just takes a facility with metaphor.
Yeah, and that's the reason for that tree upside down is an image, metaphorically, to let us know that the wisdom is glorious, different than the power in CI.
Cool. No, thank you for that. Huh?
No, in the
Hey, your name?
Sir, Louise.
invisible life of trees, so much about the roots and how the roots communicate. Other things underground see each other. I mean, that is a spirit, that's a retreat. That's a year-long retreat itself. The invisibility of the roots of life and the nourishment and the
Yeah, Peter Wolevich's book is really great on that. There's also, Richard Powers' The Overstory, in novelistic form that is just lovely. There's also a great book by Elif Shafak. The Island of Missing Trees is the title. It's a redoing of the story of Layla and Matthew. A wooden tree. And it's just, I won't give it away, but it's this amazing love story. And yeah, it's about the whole tree, roots and all. But you're absolutely right. I mean, there is this entire unseen world to us where, trees are healing each other. They're recognizing stress and sending nutrients to a stressed neighbor. In our forest, we have one huge oak tree. My wife's grandmother, Judy, who pretty much raised her. And then there are all of Judy's children around her. These other somewhat smaller oak trees. I mean, Judy's probably 200 years old. Right? And then there are these others that are 75 to 80. But they're, partner. It's her family. I think you're in this forest all connected. It's beautiful. Tract, yes?
You were talking about flourishing, and it reminded me of this book I read, Becoming Divine by Grace Jensen, about there's theology. And was talking about the patriarchal ideas focus on salvation, and that feminist theology can be focused to totality and flourishing. And you also talked about Rosemary's Ruther, we speak a pioneer of Emerson. The aspects of mortality and flourishing and nature, which comes with feminist theology. What do you think about that?
No, I love it. Grace Jansen really was the first to articulate that contrast between theologies. She was a philosophy of brutality in opposition to domination and blacks. I mean, that was really, true. That for her, true power is like that. Is birth it, is developing rather than destroy. It's pretty easy contrast to see, but how we've been doing in that regard. Right? We need reminders, as many as possible, which is why we're going to write liturgies and prayers and songs when we are pilgrimage this summer. Mark and I, their wives, are going to the Huntington Botanical Gardens. We're going to write prayers inspired by Kashikira trees. Their prayers for refugees, songs above, musicians. I play saxophone. My brothers and I have a band. Brosby is the name of the band. So silly. But we have a lot of fun with it. We had a world tour 2 summers ago where we toured here. Andy's backyard, Dave's backyard, high backyard, Deuce. That was this little tour. But then we go to the Sequoias, Sequoia National Forest, for these huge trees. We're going to rename the General Sherman and General Grant trees because we don't think trees should be named for destroying generals. Well, Sherman's he's a total bore, and it obliterated. So we're going to give some new names. Doubt that they'll take, but at least we'll name the effort. Tell some stories about them that don't have to use the war. And then we go to Inyo National Forest, where the Methuselah trees are found the oldest living creatures on the planet. These trees that are up to 8,000 years old. I'm hoping we'll be able to get there. It's pretty high up this year. We still be snow, but we're going to make the effort. That's something we can make. Hi.
Kung sort of fun with these things over your pals, bringing one together from a Catholic Christian perspective. Maybe the one is reflecting on the creation of trees and the creator of the creation of trees and all these different traditions. I think would be a very interesting paper rather than maybe a worldly perspective, a spiritual perspective, the creator of the creation of conduct. Yes. So it's different.
Yeah, I mean, that is the challenge, right? Especially when you're writing about the monotheistic traditions, you wind up writing about the creation rather than the creator. Some people find that troubling. I don't. That's just don't. Again, and here is Gilad, who is sobbing that there are these two books from the Creator, and they're equal. One is the book of nature, and we read it through science as the caliphs, as the representatives of God on earth. I mean, that's our responsibility. And well, we'll talk about Creator too. Mark is the theologian in the project, so I'll hand that over to him, and I'm here to do the ego theology stuff.
God is both faith and reason.
Pardon me?
God is both faith and reason.
Yeah, Hildegard.
Essence exposed.
Hildegard's great on that. I mean, she is such a wonderful example. And I share a paragraph that's like, there are in books written about this idea of veritas as in God's power manifest in green things. So an interesting term is probably a combination of veritas, which is Greek, and veritas, truth. So it's actually more like green truth. But usually it's trying to say it has breathing power. I'm okay with that. Truth has power. Well, not to itself, says Tom Starson. We made that as prayer.
Maybe it comes to those. When I look, I said what basically on those slides, it depends of Islamic understanding of nature, that every part of nature is praising God. So trees are actually talk, are praising God. But we don't hear them because our ears are not capable to hear those type of voices. And actually scientifically now, we hear certain level of voices, like very high level of voices would be beyond our capacity. We cannot hear it. Our gland is dirt and made a big noise, but we don't hear it because our hearing capacity is limited. And Christian that on the trip, there are some small creatures who are making noise also, we don't hear it because it's below our capacity. So this type of praise, they are praising God, is different type of hearing, required different type of ears. And if people spiritually develop, they will hear.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And that's, the idea behind Forest Baby, that Shiguryoku Jadaf. And they're not, what's the word I'm looking for? Proprietary about it. They're happy to have Christians develop it in the Christian way, and Muslims and with Jews, because they see this as a form of experiencing hearing with new ears, right? The seeing with the eyes, where Jesus says, those of ears to hear, love are hearing. But it is something that develops.
Then one some scholar, his students are asking him, you speak of the trees are praising God. How do you know that? And he said, if I have not heard it, I have not written.
Yeah, no, that's great.
So that's the idea, basically, to have certain level of spirituality.
And this is Belden Ainsworth, I quote it from him. It's mostly about a big tree in a park across the street from his house. And Jesus lost you, same was he, as that. But as the big tree with whom he has conversation. An ongoing conversation. He brings his granddaughter into the conversation with him. Just this last weekend, we had our grandsons with us. We were 2, 14, and 8. And we walked through our forest of the ancestors, and I told them stories that I do about some of them might be my ancestors that I'd never met. Matilda Beaver Store, for instance, in Bay Okra, in the end of the woods. 11 children, who was my grandmother on my father's side. And so I'm learning through these trees about these people, and I'm trying to communicate that story those stories to my children and grandchildren.
So before the Yimon, the pronounce officially over, but feel free to say and talk and eat. Just wanted to announce that it's from Nina 1001. So with the for coming, first of all, And thank you, John, for the great topic. And I'm inspired to go out and hug some trees.
Yeah, go wrong.
And yeah, feel free to stay around the heat. But officially, our program is over. Thanks for coming.